items of business, which I will take at the end of the meeting. These are the additions to the Dumfries and Galloway Council scheme of delegation and responsibilities to officers and statutory appointments, and the temporary revision to Treasury Management Strategy. Nick, can you provide the sediment and any apologies and substitutions, please, and advise which members are present at this meeting virtually via Teams?
Okay. We've had apologies from Councillor Scobie and Councillor Nicholson's substituting for him. Members joining via Teams are Councillor Davidson, Councillor Brothers, Councillor Johnston and Councillor Thompson. And just for the benefit of the audio,
and Councillor Maitland, I think, as well.
And Councillor Maitland, apologies. Just for the benefit of the audio, so present in the room are Councillor Murray, Councillor Hislop, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Nicholson.
And I confirm my agreement to the councillors named as being able to participate remotely. Do members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Anybody?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So item 7, being reference to Increased Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. My partner is employed by the trust. However, given the nature of the report, content of the decision that we asked to make, I don't consider that to need for that.
Okay, the next item is item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting for approval. Are we content to approve the minute?
Great.
Great. Good. Next item is the COVID-19 update, and this is a standing item of the subcommittee, whereby members will be provided with a verbal update at every meeting on our council's response to COVID-19 emergency. Richard Greaveson is here at the meeting to provide this update, and I'm very grateful to Julie White for coming along at very short notice, as there was a request that we had the opportunity to ask some questions on health issues as well.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Richard.
With your blessing, Leader, I think Julie's going to kick off if that's okay.
Fine, yeah, excellent.
Okay, thanks very much, and thank you, Leader, for the invite to come along this morning to talk to you, just to give you, I think, a flavour of what's happening within our Health and Social Care Partnership at the moment, as we are moving into very firmly our response phase now to COVID-19. Much of our planning arrangements are now completed around this, and we're very much into that response phase where we are anticipating quite a significant surge in demand for health and social care as a result of COVID-19 over the coming weeks. So just to give you some information around cases, so as of last night we had 104 confirmed cases in Dumfries and Galloway, and we had within DGRI we had 19 confirmed cases with a further 23 suspected cases. We also had 3 patients in ICU with a further 2 suspected cases in ICU. And in the Galloway, we had 4 suspected cases in the Galloway. At the moment, none of these have been confirmed, but they're suspected. In terms of the deaths, we've reported 10 deaths as of last night across Dumfries and Galloway as a result of COVID-19. We have also, however, seen a number of patients come through the hospital and have recovered from COVID-19. So we've seen 19 patients in total across our hospitals who have been in and who have recovered from COVID-19. Colleagues will be aware that in anticipation of the huge increase in demand for our services, we took the decision a couple of weeks ago to suspend all of our elective activity or our non-urgent activity. So that meant we suspended the vast majority of our planned theatre work, our planned outpatient capacity as well. So anything that was deemed as non-urgent, I just think to give you some confidence, we are continuing to support our patients with cancer and our cancer pathways, but everything else that's deemed as non-urgent, we've suspended that in order that we can free up the capacity of the staff to cope with the COVID-19 crisis. As a result of that, and the evidence from Italy and from other places is that the best chance you have of dealing with this is by you having as empty a hospital as possible at the start of that surge. So when the huge numbers of patients start coming through, all the evidence of, your best chance of success. So we have been, as a result of our cancellations and as a result, I have to say, of our communities, I think, working with us and our GPs working so closely with us, we've been able to maintain around 100 unoccupied beds at the moment. That fluctuates clearly on a daily basis because we are still dealing with, obviously, all of our emergency work and all of our non-COVID work. So patients are still arriving at the hospital with heart attacks, with strokes, etc., and we are still managing all of that. But our focus has to be on having a significant number of empty beds to deal with that surge, because once the cases start coming in, the evidence from elsewhere is you see cases starting to double on a daily basis, treble, and that then means that you've got to have that capacity available. But what we're also doing, all the evidence also from elsewhere, so places that are further ahead than D&G in this whole process, is that, again, the evidence shows that you should really be focusing how you can support people to remain in the community for as long as possible, that we only utilise the acute bed capacity for those who absolutely need it, and of course our critical care capacity, which is extremely limited. So we have set up a COVID assessment centre. So that's, we'll set those up in Dumfries and Stranraer, and those assessment centres are where patients, they'll contact NHS 24, so they'll phone 111, they'll have an initial triage and an initial assessment. If they need further assessment and triage, they'll be passed through to our COVID assessment hub, and where they will either receive telephone triage, or if they need to be physically assessed, they will be asked to come to that assessment centre. And wherever possible, we will be looking at how we can support patients in their own homes, in the community, to ensure that that demand on the hospital is only for those who absolutely require it. But as you will have seen in all of the media from elsewhere, the hospitals do become very quickly full as a result of this. So as you would absolutely expect of us, we have been working over the last few weeks to develop what we call our surge plan. So that is about us looking at how do we, within our existing estate, increase the number of beds that we have available to us to respond to this crisis. We have now developed a 5-stage surge plan, which we will be taking to the NHS board next week, which shows how we plan to increase our bed availability over a period of time. And there are a number of triggers in that surge plan. So once we get X number of cases in certain wards, that will trigger us moving into another stage of our surge plan, where we'll be looking at increasing our capacity elsewhere. But as you can imagine, there are some limiting factors in that in terms of how much capacity we can increase by. Some of that is space, but thankfully we are blessed in Dumfries and Galloway with a brand new hospital that gives us the capacity space-wise to extend. However, we will be limited by beds, physical beds, because as you can imagine, the whole country is trying to increase its capacity. So physical hospital beds, PPE will be an issue, and I'll talk to you about PPE in a minute, and staffing, of course. So we have, as colleagues will be aware, we're looking at how we can encourage those who have recently retired or left the service back in. We're looking at how we can redeploy people from other non sort of COVID essential roles to support the front line, with the aim of increasing that surge capacity over the coming weeks and months. We will also be looking at the use of our cottage hospitals, and a number of those as intermediate care or step-down COVID-19 hospitals for patients with COVID-19 who no longer require the use of an acute hospital bed. So that's in terms of numbers and in terms of plans where we're at. I was going to say a bit more to you, but I'm happy to stop there. The other things I was going to talk to you about were testing and PPE. But just if there's any questions on our capacity, on where we're at in terms of our plans or numbers, I'm happy to answer any questions on that just now, Leader, before I go on to the other issues, if anybody wants to ask me anything specifically.
Well, Adam and Ronnie, anybody remotely wanting to get their name on the list? Jane? Okay, Adam?
Thanks, Julie. Just, it's on the, obviously, we keep, everybody's talking about the curve, and in Dumfries and Galway it was quite clear that we were on the last local authorities to first of all report a case. And I think that we've seen a quite a significant increase in that time, but it was clear that it did come here sort of last, if you like. And I just wondered, obviously there is that national curve that everybody keeps talking about, but has there been an assessment done here within the region as to where we are on the curve?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. We have got a sort of a plan. We've got a plan based on what was the Imperial College London, the initial sort of epidemiology study that was looking at what the likelihoods. That was the one that was talking about 80% of the population potentially becoming infected, and then looking at what that curve would look like. Obviously, things have changed as a result of the social distancing measures that have been put in place. But we haven't yet at a local level got that data available to us in terms of the assumptions that are being made nationally around the impact that social distancing will have. So we are still effectively working to that kind of worst case scenario in terms of what the numbers would look like. We are expecting that over the next hopefully within the next few days, we will receive some data from the national database that will give us some evidence that we can start to look at how that curve might shift as a result of social distancing. We know broadly what some of the assumptions have been around the total number of deaths as a result of the reduction in the total number of deaths. However, we still need to get some of the assumptions that are then being made about your numbers of people who will require hospitalisation, your numbers of people that will require intensive care, and we haven't got that. That hasn't been shared yet from the national assumptions. So we're hoping to get that in the near future, and that will then help us assess where we're at. Certainly though, with most of the curves, the first part of the curve looks the same, and it's then how quickly it rises. We're pretty much mirroring that lower part of the curve in terms of our cumulative number of cases at the moment. However, the social distancing measures, the evidence is saying that that's not likely to come to fruition or start to show an impact in terms of numbers of cases for about a 3 to 4 week period, and obviously we're only in week 2 of that. So the fact that we're still on that curve for the cumulative cases, you would expect that just now because we haven't seen the impact of the social distancing. But hopefully by the next time I come back to update you, we'll have that national data and be able to show you what curve we think we're going to be on. But without a doubt, regardless of the curve, I think it's really important to say to you, regardless of the curve, that first peak that we hit is going to be extremely significant for us in both the hospital and the community setting in terms of the capacity that we've currently got.
So just a quick follow on terms of that data, is that from the Imperial College of London, or is that come from somebody else?
I think what's happened is because of the initial data was the Imperial College data, and I think as a result of the social distancing measures, Scottish Government and other boards and are collaborating around trying from a scientific point of view understand what the impact of that might be. So it is more work that's being done at Scottish Government level actually, Adam, rather than Imperial College, but I'm sure the experts are all round the table input into that at the moment.
Yes.
Roddy?
And thanks, you've answered part of my question regarding beds that I had last week. Just talking about the curve and when you reach the top, you projection obviously of a huge number.
Yeah.
Have you, and then you talked about the beds again, but have you any additional beds that you can utilise when at top of the curve, and have you got enough?
Yeah. So
there's a couple of things on the staffing. You've obviously you've got people retired, people that left and coming back in, but additionality to that in the staffing, there are other staffs, for example, radiographers or physiotherapists, or because they'll deal with a lot of the functional lungs, etc. So you might not have them skills there. One of the things I'm asking about is the disclosure. If you've got people coming in from outside the area, and everybody that comes into the hospital has to go through a disclosure, and it's a 2-week wait as far as I'm aware just now. But there are opportunities for you to do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a risk assessment on the individuals within that, but that didn't seem to be happening from my, from what I'm hearing. Now you can maybe comment, or you can maybe go away and have a look at that one. The deaths, I think it's important. Once we got some communications through on the deaths for the very start, which I'm grateful for you, and you get the numbers on a national level on a daily basis about deaths. Now that was going to happen, but then, for example, you had one death recorded and it was put out into the public. Then the next number we got was 6, then all of a sudden it's none. You don't get that information. We're not getting that information through. Now, members of the public, I think, to have the trust in us, need that information on a daily basis. It's not as if we're trying to hide something. It's being done nationally, so why can it not be done locally as well?
Is that okay? I'll come back to all of this then. So in terms of the actual physical beds, we have space. So we've identified space within the hospital. As I say, there are limiting factors on how much of that space you can use, and those limiting factors are the physical beds, the PPE and the staffing to safely staff that. So we have identified, we do have a number of beds that we still had in stock from the old hospital when we staffed the new hospital with new beds, staffed them when we filled it with new beds. So we did have a number of beds. However, we don't have sufficient beds in stock to be able to deliver the totality of our surge plan. What we have done is we have ordered additional beds, but the lead-in time for those beds can be a number of weeks because of, again, the demand that's coming from elsewhere. So the direct answer to your question, do we have enough beds just now? No, we don't. But we have ordered some, but that will be a limiting factor in terms of what we can do. We are looking at other alternatives for those beds at the moment, and where we might be able to procure those beds from or get the support from. So things like the Army, for example, in terms of the beds that might be available elsewhere in relation to that. So we are looking at alternatives, but as things stand at the moment, we don't have the number of beds to fill the total of the surge plan when we get to that maximum level. In terms of staffing, we have developed a deployment hub, which essentially is looking at staff who are returning, where we can match their skills best, but it's also looking at where we have staff who were before COVID-19, obviously delivering very important roles for us across health and social care, but whose roles have changed as a result of this because, for example, we've cancelled particular services, we're not delivering the same range of services, and looking at deploying them into frontline services. But again, I think we need to be in no doubt, staffing will be a major issue for us. Staffing will be a challenge for us as we increase our number of beds, as we increase our capacity, because it is a finite resource, particularly the staffing with the specific skills. So one of the challenging areas will be in intensive care, obviously, is making sure that we've got that sufficient resource within intensive care to staff an increased number of ventilated patients. But our lead nurses, our director of nursing, etc., are all absolutely focused on that and making sure that we continue to ensure we have safe staffing levels, obviously, across all of our facilities. But that will be a challenge. I'll take the disclosure issue out with the room. There is an ability for us to do risk assessments for staff before they start. So if there is, if there's cases where it can happen in all cases, depends on the role. But cases where that could have happened where it's not, then we would want to hear about that. But I would have to say that, our workforce colleagues, our HR colleagues are working extremely closely with us to absolutely minimise any delay from us getting additional staff into the system. And we also have a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the local authority, which is helpful in enabling us to shared resource across. So where there are roles within the local authority, for example, that could be deployed in a way to support that increased effort within health. So for example, when we're looking at catering staff, domestic staff, etc., if there were individuals who could be redeployed into that, we've got a memorandum of understanding that facilitates that and supports that. In terms of the deaths and the reporting, deaths were only being reported at a national level up until we issued a statement that said we've had our first deaths, because we thought that was really important that the public in Dumfries and Galloway recognised that there had been the first deaths in Dumfries and Galloway. However, the total number of deaths was being reported at a national level and not at each health board level. But we've made the decision that we will report those deaths at a local level. And one of the reasons we didn't do it very early on when you've got 3 or 4 patients is because of the low numbers, and we generally do not report on low numbers of anything because of patient confidentiality and the ability for people to be identified in those times. We never report cases under 5 of anything at the moment. We will say it's less than 5, but we won't report the specific number for patient confidentiality. We're now at 10 deaths. We are reporting those deaths, and I know that there are discussions going on about how frequently we provide those reports to elected members, and you know, we will continue to provide you with those reports in terms of the numbers of deaths.
Yeah, well, just on that last one, yeah, there was one, then there was a report of 6 straight after that, but so that, you know, I don't understand why it wasn't then 7 or 8, because, you know, you reported it, you reported after the 5.
Yeah, because they've happened within a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
So we might have 3 deaths within a 24-hour period, which will mean you'll go from 5 to 8 within that 24-hour period, and we are only reporting on a 24-hour period. We're not reporting every single time there's a death.
I think it is important though that, you know, for public confidence in which the information that's coming out, that it is done in a daily level. But he said it's going to be done on a daily level from now, and I'm quite happy with that now.
Are you affected at all by it? I mean, the Scottish Government yesterday reported a change in the way in which they were reporting deaths, that they were now coming through the National Register, I think, rather than the health boards. Does that affect our reporting at all?
It's a technicality in terms of how the deaths are actually then being reported. We did have our own local system. We're going to maintain our local system for the next week, just to make sure that the new system, once the new system comes in, that we're just so that we understand if there's any time lags at all between reporting, and so we'll maintain our local system until we're absolutely sure that the new national system is reporting those deaths in a timely manner to us.
Jane?
Thank you very much, Elaine. Julie, I commend your candour today, and I come this request the flow of accurate information does continue. I was a little concerned when I read about the assessment centre in the press, because when on first reading, it's not entirely clear to me that the public are not expected under any circumstances simply to arrive at the door and expect to be assessed. And I think, if I'm right, that is the message you wish to convey clearly.
Yes, absolutely, Jane. The individuals who the initial triage would be done by NHS 24, and if individuals required further triage, they would get a telephone assessment. If they are then required to come into the centre, they will be advised by that clinician that they're required to come into the centre for further assessment. So it is not an assessment centre for people to turn up to, absolutely not. It's by appointment only.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Ian, is that?
Is that better? Right, so I've got some questions for later on. I'll give you the dates and what some scenarios we will have. But so you've got a report going next week. You're saying July, 1st of July. No, thanks very much for coming along. It's very much appreciated. To not give us a brief update on always ask questions. The 5-stage search plan, can we access that to see how what that looks like yourself on that, maybe put forward to us. You spoke about increasing the PGI capacity. I've heard in the last round that maybe that has been double up beds in the single rooms. I wonder if that's one of the options that you're actually looking at. I've got a lot of skills question, but I'll maybe leave that for after the testing and the few people. The memorandum of understanding normally comes in front of the council, that type of thing. So I just was interested in what mechanism was used in order to gain that.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, in terms of the 5-stage surge plan, that's still in the very early stages of development, Ian, and it's something that we absolutely need to work through with our senior clinical teams first to be absolutely confident, and before that goes, before it goes anywhere else, it'll be presented at a high level to NHS board on Monday. I think the message for the elected members is we have a plan to increase our capacity, but that plan is going to be limited by the availability of staffing, ensuring that we've got appropriate PPE and the availability of beds. What I will commit to doing is giving you, at the next update, a high level numbers in terms of the increase in the beds. But at this stage in time, I think these have still to be discussed in detail with our clinical teams, and therefore I really don't want to say any more than that about it just now, Ian, in terms of what's in the plan and what's not in the plan. But everything is being considered, every space, every nook and cranny, in terms of how we can increase our capacity. In terms of the MOU, Ian, that was agreed through the integration the partnership forum with our colleagues in workforce in both the council and the NHS, and it all went to the JCG within the local authority to be approved a couple of years ago through the integrated partnership forum. So that's just a kind of memorandum of understanding for how we work in partnership effectively and utilise the teams in our integrated teams. So that's something that absolutely can be shared. That's where that was agreed. And sorry, Ian, was there a final part that I missed there?
No, really. The other stuff that you did, I'll pick up after your presentation.
Okay, Julie, I know your time's limited, so you...
Yeah, okay. So just in terms of a few more things then from me, in terms of testing, we were one of the first places in Scotland to start testing our staff and their household contacts. So people who were symptomatic, whether it was the staff member or their household contact, we introduced that testing. We also were, I think probably if not the first, certainly one of the first to extend that out to our partner organisations in social care and indeed the police locally as well, and that has been really well received by our colleagues, particularly in the police and also within the local authority and in our partner organisations around social care, for us to test staff who are symptomatic or family members of staff who are symptomatic in order that we can get the staff back as quickly as possible. So we're doing approximately between 50 and 60 tests a day in relation to that. And you know, again, that has been very helpful in our ability to bring staff back if the results are negative for either themselves or their family members. So we will continue to do that and we'll continue to offer that service. I should say, however, it is on a prioritisation basis, so we need to make sure we cannot test absolutely everybody, so there are categories in terms of that prioritisation to ensure that we're absolutely ensuring that the first call on that is people at the front line. But that seems to be working well here in Dumfries and Galloway, certainly in comparison with, you know, other parts of the country. I think we've done really well in getting that established early on and us being able to understand the impact, and that undoubtedly has led to an increase in the number of confirmed cases within Dumfries and Galloway. So when you look at the total number of cases being confirmed as being 104, many of those will be either staff members or household contacts of staff members, which increases our total number. So because there has been feedback that it looks like our numbers are big, are high in comparison to elsewhere, but obviously we've been doing quite early on quite a significant amount of testing of staff and household contacts. In terms of PPE remains continues to be a challenge. There was new guidance issued at the end of the day yesterday in relation to PPE across all settings. We have just this morning at the NHS Gold Command agreed to establish a group locally looking at that so that we can get out some quite clear guidance to staff working across our partnership around the use of PPE. I think the key message for that is that PPE will always be a finite stock. So we need to make sure that where it is being used across the whole of the public sector, that it's being used appropriately. And, you know, that we have to absolutely, and we will, work in accordance with the new guidance. There is no doubt about that, but I think the message around it always it is a finite stock, and if people are using it when they don't need to use it, then that will mean that, you know, there is less available for the time when we do need it. There was specific issues about PPE for social care staff, just in terms of the availability of PPE for social care staff. We were asked as a Health and Social Care Partnership to identify drop-off points where the National Distribution Centre could issue PPE for social care providers. We submitted 2 drop-off points, one in Dumfries and one in Stranraer. My understanding this morning is that we have had our first deliveries and that PPE has made its way to our some of our providers, but obviously this is a work in progress without a doubt, but there has been progress over the last week just in terms of us having that proactive distribution of PPE from the National Distribution Centre to the local distribution centres. The only other thing I was going to raise was just around the shielding process. So colleagues will be aware of the shielding process announced by government. We have been working extremely closely with Richard and the team in the local authority around our shielding process, just to make you aware that in the first tranche of patients that were identified, there are 6 categories of patients. Well, there's a 7th has now been added, but there were at the time 6 categories of patients. And of the first categories that were identified, approximately 3,000 patients in Dumfries and Galloway were identified as requiring shielding. We're expecting that will go up to between probably 5,000 and 5,500 patients. And we are now proactively ensuring that those individuals who are identified as requiring support with whether it be shopping, medications delivery, etc., that we are working to support them through the support of the fulfilment team, which Richard and Mark have been leading on in the local authority. And just probably finally from me, I would want to say that I think working in Dumfries and Galloway, it's going to be hugely challenging over the next few months for us all across the public sector and for those of us in health and social care. However, I have to say there is no place I would rather be in Scotland in terms of our ability to work together across our partner organisations. I think already the strength of partnership working that has been shown to support us, for example, the support that we've had through our education colleagues around the childcare provision for children of essential workers, the support that we've had from Richard and the team around the shielding process, and the work of the tactical LRP and the strategic LRP. I think, you know, we are in a very good place to respond, and any requests certainly that I've made as the Chief Officer for Health and Social Care to colleagues within the local authority have been, you know, responded to fantastically. And I think, as I say, this is not a good place for any of us to be in terms of what we're facing over the next few months. But certainly in terms of where we're at as a partnership, I just wanted to formally thank everybody in the local authority and our wider partners for all the support that we've had up until now, and absolutely look forward to continuing with those really positive partnership relations as we move forward.
Well, thanks, Julie. That's good to know. Ian, you indicated you had some more questions. Anybody else? Ivor? Okay, Ian.
Yes, please.
He's got the earphones in. I've got a couple of things that have come up there. So see when it comes to testing, Julie, so that, the testing, go back in the last week or so, last even couple of weeks, there's been I would say an issue, and it's been recognised nationally about the workforce, how we keep the workforce at the front, testing the right way. So I've had some reassurances about that. But the workforce themselves, what I'm kind of getting the feeling from the workforce is that, okay, as we go forward, the working patterns are changing potentially. You've outlined that, that'll probably outlined in the search plan, I would imagine. We're heading to a stage of being business critical, but we've changed around about that, so there'll be a lot of employees. This is a question I've always put to the council as well, not just yourself. So if we head towards business critical, workforce arrangements, so people are doing jobs that they're not used to doing, and so on and so forth. How long will this type of, how long will it be in? Because some of the concerns I'm getting it probably affect morale and so on of the workforce. And it's across both partnerships, across the whole partnerships, it's actually, if they look at the reassurance that, okay, these are temperatures, it doesn't affect the working terms and conditions as it stands. And at some point we'll get to a level of normality, whether 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, or even a year's that we'll all get back to hopefully a better business as usual at some point. So it's reassurance in particular on the workforce, because I think if they don't get that reassurance, I would imagine that will have an impact on things as we go forward.
Sorry, did you want me to answer that?
I've got one more, just okay.
Okay, so in terms of the deployment of staff into alternative duties at the moment, I have to say I'm not in a position to say to you when we're going to return to normal, because we're just entering our response phase at the moment. This is just starting in Dumfries and Galloway, so it could be some considerable time before we are going back to business as usual. I think it would be wrong of me to guess at the moment, Ian, how long that might be for. But what I would say is that we have got fantastic teams of staff who have responded so well to the ask of them to support in different ways, and again that's right across the partnership, whether that's just directly within health or with colleagues in the local authority and staff within the local authority. And I think that whilst it will be an extremely challenging time for all of us and all of the staff that are working, and particularly those at the front line, we have got a fantastic range of clinical teams, of support teams, support services teams, and those who are working behind the scenes to support our frontline staff. And my view is that we will absolutely come together to face this crisis together, and we will do everything we can to keep the morale of our staff as high as it can be. We have made sure that we have got support mechanisms in place to be supporting staff through what will be a very difficult time for staff working at the front line. So making sure that there is that additional support being offered to them that they can access on a one-to-one basis when they need it, in order that we can maintain that, the resilience of our staff during what could be a drawn-out, difficult period of time. So I would want to give you assurance that we're absolutely focused on trying to support the staff through this, but I would also want members to be, and I'm sure you are already aware, we have got really strong, resilient clinical and support teams out there that are working very closely with us, and certainly, we will do our best to support them and support their resilience as we move forward.
Thanks, I just got a couple of quick points. There was an announcement by the UK government to say that they're writing off, I should say, of all the debt for NHS. I just wondered how does that impact on this loan? Here in Scotland, we've got any information in answer to that. And a question I've asked you at the time, is there anything else, you probably answered it, but is there anything else we can do as a council, members of the council, to support you that we're not already doing?
Ian, I'm sorry, I can't answer the one on the writing off of the debt. To be honest, it's that announcement will lead to further discussions with Scottish Government about our financial position overall. Right now we are engaged in discussions with Scottish Government about what we're calling our mobilisation plan, which is our plan that sets out all of the additional support that we need for us to respond as well as we can to this crisis. And we're in conversation with Scottish Government about that just now. But in terms of the other announcement, I'm sorry, and I can obviously speak to Katie around that, but I'm not able to answer that at the moment. In terms of, is there anything else that the local authority can be doing? I think that I think your support and Councillor Nicholson mentioned that in terms of us making sure that we're getting that accurate information to the public. I think that's really, really helpful, how we can work together, and we do have a comms cell as well that's working closely together. I think how we make sure that we try our best, but recognising this is an extremely busy time for us all, but we try our best to keep you all as informed as we possibly can, so that you are supporting us with the sharing of that information in our communities. I think that would be really helpful. But in terms of our relationship with the officers within the council and the senior team and their teams, you know, I think the support that we've had here in Dumfries and Galloway, as I say, has absolutely been second to none, and that is based on, you know, the evidence of what we've been able to deliver in a very short period of time for our communities.
Ivor and then Adam.
It's to do with the shielding, where we're putting more and more people into sort of that category. How long do you see that actually lasting? I look at things sort of from an agricultural background. The nearest I have to this is foot and mouth. Mm-hmm. Now we have the UK, which is FND free, and you have other areas where it's endemic, where they actually vaccinate. Are we looking that we might have to look at shielding until A, we find a vaccine, or it's been through the whole population and we've got a resistance to this?
Yeah, again, Ivor, that's probably one for our medics and our scientists to come up with what the definitive guidance is. All I would say is the initial letter that's gone to patients for shielding has been for a 12-week period. So that we're at, and then we will obviously be continually reassessing where we're at both a national UK level and a Scottish level in relation to that. So the initial guidance has been for people to self-isolate for 12 weeks, and that shielding group is those identified because specifically of their health conditions that makes them particularly vulnerable to COVID-19, and that those individuals have been written to, and they've been advised to self-isolate for 12 weeks. And I would work with colleagues in the local authorities about us understanding what additional support people might need to enable them to self-isolate for that period of 12 weeks, and us working together to deliver that support.
Adam?
Yeah, just on the testing, I appreciate the work that you're doing on testing. You had said that Dumfries and Galloway was one of the first health boards to offer testing to health and social care staff and the household contacts, and then to roll it out to the wider partners in health and social care. I'm just wondering, is there something that we've done differently? Because I know there's been a whole lot of arguments rehearsed nationally around testing, particularly for health and social care staff, who I'm sure we all agree are the most important at this time, so we can make sure we've got that capacity that you require for your various surge plans. Is there something that we've done differently here, and what was the sort of timelines for that? You know, are we at a stage now where every member, every health and social care staff member has been tested, or what's the dates around that?
Yeah, so we've probably been testing. It feels like a long time, but it's probably been since, you know, our first case. So it would be 2 to 3 weeks now in Dumfries and Galloway. So we've absolutely not tested every member of staff. The testing is only valid in those who are symptomatic, yeah, or symptomatic household contacts. So when we do have now a process for staff when they are symptomatic or a member of their household contact is symptomatic, a phone number for them to contact, for them again to get some advice about what they should do, and if they meet the criteria, then for them to be offered to be tested. So there is a process in place locally, Adam, that has been led by our health protection team that sit within the public health team. And again, that's been another team that's worked really, really closely across the partnership with partners and working to make sure that we are prioritising those at the front line and making sure we're getting people tested as quickly as we possibly can. So I think what we did, I don't know that we've done anything differently. I think what we just did was early on we identified that for us in our partnership, one of the big limiting factors in terms of our ability to respond to this was going to be if we had significant numbers of staff who were self-isolating, and we just put that process in place very early on through our health protection team. So as I say, I'm very glad that we did do that, because it has resulted in significant numbers of people being able to be back at work. But I don't think that there was nothing of difference in Dumfries and Galloway. We just decided early on that that was the approach we were going to take.
Okay. Any other questions for Julie?
Yes,
Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, it's just on PPE. Obviously, there's been a number of concern raised about getting access to that. Obviously, there's national challenges about a finite supply getting delivered. But I was wondering, how are we making sure we're working across the various home care providers? Because obviously, while we have some staff directly, the bulk of home care is provided by third-party independent providers. So they have their own routes to get PPE, but how is that being coordinated and overseen? Whether it's at the hubs providing just for their own staff, or is it to other partners, or is it community groups, or how are we prioritising that in terms of getting that in a coordinated fashion?
Okay, so Stephen, this approach applies for all of our providers, not just our in-house providers. So there is a national hub at the distribution centre that providers can phone to request PPE, and they will then get a code for their request for PPE. The PPE will then be distributed to the local distribution centre, and the provider will then use that code to access the PPE for that provider. So I have been provided with a big long list of all of the providers in Dumfries and Galloway that the National Distribution Centre believes that it needs to support, and I've shared that with colleagues in the Health and Social Care Partnership to make sure that we're not missing anybody. But the same process applies to those in the third and independent sector as it does to our in-house service.
Okay, thanks. That sounds sensible. I'm just wondering, so there'll be an allotment then for each bid, if you like, for the PPE equipment, sort of from the list of the various providers that would determine the needs a certain amount of PPE equipment. So it'll come in bagged and tagged for each provider rather than just to be distributed.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that include like care homes and so on, or are they making their own arrangements?
Yeah, so all of the providers can, when they have, they can make a call on that National Distribution Centre for PPE. Now the challenge is obviously that not 100% of the requests are being fulfilled. There are certain requests where they'll only receive maybe, a certain percentage of what's been asked for because of the finite nature of the supply nationally. But there's certainly been significant progress made in Scotland over the last week or so in relation to us supporting social care providers in the same way as we're supporting the NHS providers.
Any other questions? Anybody remotely? Okay, thanks very much for that, Julie. That's much appreciated, taking the time to come down.
Okay, and I'm happy to come back again in future. Just let me know when. Thanks.
Richard?
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, members. Just to pick up really on some of the points that Julie mentioned there, that there are a number of things where I could have perhaps jumped in and given a sort of a council perspective in terms of how we're working across the local resilience partnership. I know Julie's time was limited, so I wanted you to have the opportunity to hear from her, but I will pick up on some of those points now, if I may, because I think it's really important. And I start from a position of reiterating what Julie said about the way that we're working in terms of the local resilience partnership. I've just been on a call with on Gavin's behalf with the other chief executives across Scotland, and I have to say that the relationship and the partnership we have with the NHS D&G and our partners is not mirrored in other parts of Scotland, and that's absolutely clear when I'm listening to the conversations as I have done this morning. And some of the examples that I can give have been touched on already. Maybe start with the approach to shielding, if I may, because shielding obviously was introduced probably about 10 days ago now as a specific target group, which is absolutely right and appropriate. However, in Dumfries and Galloway, we already put into place a number of processes and procedures around how we would together as a local resilience partnerships try to protect our most vulnerable individuals at this time in reaction to this pandemic. And as a consequence, shielding has really formed part of what was a structured and a planned approach anyway. It's absolutely been enhanced, and there is a focus and there is some additional support from Scottish Government in that regard. But it really did fall into a model that we'd had in place, and a model that is now being replicated across other parts of Scotland and presented as best practice. So in terms of the social work access team that has been enhanced with circa 25 colleagues from different parts of the authority, I think I mentioned this last week, we're not just taking the information that's been presented to us from the Scottish Government and the NHS around that group that is specifically identified through shielding, of which there are now 5,000. Julie said there was 3. We had another 2,000 data names issued to us last night. So we've got 5,000 in that group. We had already had 4,000 vulnerable individuals identified through social work services. And in addition to that, we've got information coming in from GPs directly. We have then augmented that with information around vulnerable people from homelessness, from the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, and from registered social landlords. So all of that information around the most vulnerable people in our communities is being directed into the social work access team, where that triage is happening. And I visited the centre earlier this week. Councillor Carruthers, picking up on your point, the staff that we have brigaded together from different parts of the council are doing a phenomenal job, absolutely unbelievable piece of work, reacting to some really quite distressing telephone calls at times. And I can assure you they are being given the support, the guidance, the coaching, the mentoring, the scripts to work by our social work colleagues to make sure that they're supported throughout this process. And they're doing a great job. From there, the information that we are getting from the team is going in a number of directions. If we have assurances from the vulnerable people in our community that they're receiving the support they require through the most recent Scottish Government national food parcels, then that's great. And through pharmaceutical medical provision direct from community pharmacies, then that reaches a point of fulfilment, and that too is great to hear. And as a consequence, we can then move on to the fact that where we have individuals who are not receiving the support they need, and that can be in a range of services, we are providing that support. So if the Scottish Food, the Government national food packs are insufficient, if they don't reach the required dietary needs, we will intervene through that triage, and we will ensure that through our solutions centre and our catering provision, then that additional food is transported to the individuals in the community that is required. If they're not getting any food support at all, then they too will be included within the transport and catering logistics model, and we will ensure that those individuals get that food. If the local community pharmacies can't deliver the medicine, they then contact the Solutions Centre, and we ensure that we go up and pick the medicine up and take it to the individual directly. If the individual during the telephone conversation suggests that there are other key areas of support they need, be that health and well-being, emotional support, that's directed through our local community hub, and they are contacted by our community groups and or our third sector that have volunteered to support us in that regard. Or even if they need just basic help and things like dog food, dog walking, things like that, we're then providing directly through those community hubs and with third sector support. What I would say that the other area we're looking at is also facilities. We've had some calls about blocked drains, anything that could be simple in the home. Again, we're making sure that the staff we have that within the council who are not undertaking core duties at the moment but are available to undertake these type of tasks, we're identifying and we're sending to individuals to try and help them, support them at this time as well. So I guess each of those elements ultimately lead to what we would call fulfilment, if you like, at the end of the call. Part of that, obviously, that we talked about food. Part of that is that the enhancement to the free school meal model, I think, has been a significant positive step that we've taken. I think we reported to members previously that the uptake on the free school meal provision in the schools that we had remained opened as hubs was really low. I think at its peak was 142, and when we think about the number of individuals who would qualify for free school meals under a normal set of circumstances, that figure rings alarm bells and rang alarm bells for the resilience team. So as a consequence, we discussed with the logistics team, with the transportation team, how we could take a different approach. And a challenging approach, but one we felt was really, really important, and that was to take the meals to the individuals as opposed to asking them to come into the schools. And I know members have received an update in your weekly update in terms of this process. But today's the first day that that system kicks in, so to speak. And we are at the moment delivering 1,600 free meals today. That's a mix between the free school meals and those that have been contacted through the triage method within shielding, and that's over 900 delivery routes. So even the information, I spoke to colleagues who were still packing boxes of food at 10 o'clock last night, and were having to change routes as we were getting more people register late in the evening. Massive logistical challenge, but I can't speak highly enough of them, and I spent time with them at Cargan Towers yesterday. Phenomenal work. Absolutely superb, making sure that significant number of meals are being delivered today and will be delivered twice weekly from now on to those vulnerable groups. And that's very much a shifting sand. We know that group will probably increase. We know that through discussion and dialogue, there'll be different people requiring different solutions and fulfilment needs, but nevertheless, I think the process we have in place allows for that flexibility, allows for that growth, and is a good start. One of the things I wanted to touch on this morning was the community support. And as we reported last week, the response from the communities of Dumfries and Galloway has been phenomenal, and we have registers of community groups who are wanting to help, individuals who are wanting to help, and indeed a long list of individuals from the third sector support group that have collated a number of individuals for us. We started to pick up a number of conversations this week where individuals are frustrated because they haven't yet been contacted to seek that help and support. And it's been an interesting one for us because, as members will be aware, we have a number of staff who are obviously still paid that are not fulfilling their day job right now, and therefore a focus for us, I don't think unrealistically at this time, is to make sure that those staff are actually undertaking duties and they have been redirected into a whole range of these key support areas. The point I made to the community cell yesterday was that it was critical that we communicate with the third sector and the communities and the volunteers who have offered support. We will need them. There is no doubt about that. And we've started to ensure that we're in a local community, now that we're getting the data in the level that we're getting, we're able, if it's better placed being delivered by a local community and a local food partner, that will absolutely start to happen now. But it's just the last 2 weeks have been a bit fraught. We didn't want anybody to slip through the gaps, and therefore, to a large degree, we've tried to make sure we've got our own staff being utilised to make sure we deliver these critical services to people across the region. But absolutely, the communities that have registered an interest and the individuals who want to help and support will be needed. This is a long haul, as we'd suggested before. There are various curves. Councillor Wilson, you talked about the curve earlier, dependent upon which part of the resilience response we're considering. There are different curves and different timelines. I referred to one yesterday where it showed us on week 9 of 23. So we're in this for the long haul, and we will need the support of our communities to be sustainable to the level and extent that we're demonstrating now over the piece. So that will absolutely happen, and we'll make sure that dialogue with communities is forthcoming to make sure that's the case. In terms of staffing, a quick update for members. At the moment, in terms of sickness absence due to COVID-19, we have 108 positions across the council where staff are absent from work sick as a consequence of COVID. And we have 1,426 staff self-isolating at the moment. And again, going back to Councillor Carruthers' point, what's been absolutely critical is that managers are making contact with these staff to making sure that we reach out and we provide the right level of support at these stressful times. We need staff to be resilient. We need them to return to the workplace. So it's absolutely important that that contact is made. In the workplace itself, where we know staff are working flat out, the day-to-day supervisory and management support provision is something that I'm discussing with the cell leads, and they're talking to their respective managers about on a daily basis. Morale absolutely is critical. I have to say that the teams that I'm visiting at the moment, as I say, I was at Cargan Towers yesterday. Early on in the week, I visited the Social Work Access Team Hub at Irish Street. Staff are highly motivated and committed to doing a fantastic job in these critical, unprecedented times. But as we've said, this is going to be a long haul. We need to be resilient. We need to be sustainable. It needs to be sustainable. And as a consequence, we recognise staff absolutely need that support and management intervention, if you like, to make sure that that's the case. We've also reached out to our occupational health provider, Genesis, who are putting in place a number of intervention methods whereby we can fast track certain elements of support, be that mental health and support or otherwise at the moment. So they're very much involved and are liaising with the workforce cell to make sure that we provide as much support as we can to staff in the workplace. As at the 3rd of April, there are 241 staff that are now deployed into areas that isn't their core duties. Right the way across the service. I think I reported last week we might have been at between 20 and 50. I can't remember where we were last time we spoke, but you can see the significant increase in the work to identify staff that are not undertaking core duties that can be redirected onto priority areas at the moment. We have another 300 on the list. And we're working through things like we talked about the food and the enhanced school meal proposals and shielding. There are a number of staff almost hourly being redirected onto those services, not only for food prep but also for transportation, as you can imagine, given the scale and the numbers that we're talking about. Couple of other things, if I may. PPE. Julie obviously covered PPE from a health and social care NHS perspective. And again, just picking up on the conversation that I've been privy to this morning with chief executives of across local authorities and LRP leads. This is a national issue right now, 100%. We've obviously received the new public health guidance on health and care workers yesterday, which enhances and increases the pressure that we have on PPE at the moment. There are daily conversations with ministers about the supply chain and the fact that we have nationally now some quite critical issues and challenges with the supply chain of PPE in certain circumstances. In Dumfries and Galloway, we've been very clear with our staff that we will not ask staff to do anything unless they have the appropriate PPE, and that's a message that we're consistently delivering through the cell leads. The interpretation of what those PPE requirements are not always clear from the guidance that we've received recently. We will undertake our own risk assessment and apply judgment where appropriate. Which is absolutely the appropriate thing to do. But we recognise that it's a national issue. We recognise there are some challenges in there, and as a consequence of that, we've established a central buying hub for Dumfries and Galloway to augment and supplement the national provision that we're getting, and as Julie referred to earlier. So the central buying hub is communicating with all internal services that require PPE and comprising a list of items that are required. We're currently in communication, as I said, with national providers to secure PPE through that route where we can. But if we can't, we are absolutely reaching out to the contacts that we've got locally and the relationships we've got with our established providers to try and help and receive supplies directly from those routes. And as I said, that sometimes the specification for these PPE requirements are changing, and the recommendations from last night has sort of shifted the picture again somewhat. In Dumfries and Galloway at the moment, we have supplies of everything that we need. Some of them are very low, and I want to be totally upfront and honest with you. Some of them are very low at the moment. Face masks particularly are very low. Our distribution outlets for gloves has now stopped. China are not exporting the gloves that we had previously, so we are now, again, we've escalated that nationally, albeit we have sourced a local supplier as well. So we're doing everything that we can, both on a national and local level, to make sure that we get the PPE in that we need. And when we do get the call in from different parts of either our council or our wider partnership, we're prioritising. We're currently prioritising home care and social work in terms of PPE, and we're also sharing resource where we require and where we can with NHS suppliers. And there was an example of that in regard to sanitisers last night, where we've supported the NHS because our provision is okay at the moment. So it's an issue, it's a challenge, but we're working together to try and overcome it. In the ways that I've described. A couple of other things, members. Childcare arrangements. Again, I think it's fair to say that the take-up, the placements have been low in terms of our childcare arrangements for key workers. I think they total 90 at the peak. And again, in dialogue with colleagues in the NHS, they are witnessing real challenges with the workforce aligned with childcare. So I'm on Julie referred to the deployment hub this morning. I'm on a call with them today to discuss how we can promote and increase the number of individuals that we can include within our childcare arrangements in order to address their key worker requirements in the NHS. So we'll review the position, we'll proactively engage with the NHS and indeed with other partners to ensure that the provision that we have in place right now meets their needs in terms of times, location, access arrangements. And if we need to change and be flexible, then we will. And that area falls within the cell hub and my responsibility moving forward. So that's something that we're looking at as we speak. Members received an update on economic development last week. So very quickly, we've now had 73 grants paid out, almost £1 million into the local economy through that grant process and economic development. So I think that's further examples of good work in that regard. And also in terms of grant provision, a quick update this morning from our community colleagues in regard to anti-poverty related community grants, which are in excess of £220,000 since the COVID emergency situation was upon us. And again, I can provide members with more detail if required on that, but we're working hard to support communities both from a grant perspective and from a business perspective in terms of the grant aid that's available to us. I'll probably stop there, Leader, if I may. Hopefully that gives an update of a number of areas and it picks up some of the questions from last week, and hopefully Julie's attendance has also picked up some of the questions that were picked up and raised last week as well, but obviously happy to take questions, Leader.
I'm presumably when you say 108 staff are off with COVID-19, that's people with symptoms rather than tested?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, any questions? Ivor, Ronnie?
The
And Jane? Okay, Ivor.
business grants, I noticed more sort of traffic on the social networks. I think there's one helping Dumfries and Galloway or something, it's the Chamber, where people seem to be getting a wee bit more fraught with the fact that they're not getting out. Is there any way you could maybe put something on that site just to say, look, we are dealing with them, give us a bit of time or something like that, just to give them a bit of confidence that, you know, they are being looked at. Another one was furlough. There seems to be maybe not so much the smaller companies that might have 5 to 10 staff, but if you've got 100 staff and you've furloughed them, if you've no money coming in, and you're not entitled to any of the grants, there's a problem there whereby you have to pay that furlough and you have to then sort of reclaim it from HMRC. I heard that there were big companies that were sort of struggling to do that, so there's maybe something there that you could maybe feed back to Steve and just say, look, is there something that we can do to actually get these people over that first hurdle maybe, and going forward there might be something we can look at.
I think there's also some small companies or small businesses where, you know, trying to find basically 2 months of wages when you've only had 2 weeks of business coming in is actually going to be quite a challenge for us.
I'll feed that back to Steve. Councillor Hislop. I respond about putting the information out to the Chamber and so on. Again, Leader, I'll speak to Steve and see what we can do in terms of adding information to the website.
Okay, Ronnie?
Yeah, I think Ivor's point's well made in that, and I think, you know, if people don't have the confidence of getting that money through and they've got to wait that time, then instead of furloughing, they're paying people off. You know, so that's an even more difficult situation for people. Okay. So I think it is important that we do highlight that and push that forward and help as much as we can. On the staff, there's 426 self-isolating at the moment, as you said, and 108 are absent through symptoms. I take it the self-isolating ones have got symptoms as well. But how do you, what are the procedures for them returning? Because obviously, you know, that they can go off again with other symptoms, or how do we know that they're actually fit to come back to work? Or and when they're self-isolating, some people may self-isolate once, then their partners or whoever it is might have symptoms again, and then they're self-isolating again. So what's what kind of timescales is involved in all this?
Thanks, Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, well, I mean, whenever a member of staff comes back or is, if you like, ready to return, that we'll undertake the normal return to work process, which is a discussion with them, and that's happening remotely as well as face to face at the moment. Obviously, no one case is the same, so we've encouraged managers to apply an element of of common sense and have that dialogue with staff to make sure that they are fit for purpose and they're not displaying any symptoms anymore. and B, you know, if that's the case, then we're obviously still encouraging, unless they're key workers in terms of the response, to work remotely, to self-isolate, but carry on, you know, working in their home. So I guess we're endeavouring to apply as flexible approach as we can, but a supportive approach that we can to the staff, recognising their concerns, but also, you know, we want staff to be back in the workplace in some way, shape or form, helping and supporting us in terms of the emergency procedures.
I don't know if you'll have numbers just now, but, you know, out of them 426, for example, how many of them have self-isolated more than once?
I don't have the numbers, but I can get more detailed breakdown of where we are in terms of you know, the more specifics. I'll speak to the workforce cell and see if we can send something out to members that would be of interest to you. Just for interest, we also distributed a really quite detailed FAQ document to all staff this week, in terms of explaining exactly the council's ethos, our approach to the whole situation, as well as answering a number of questions and a good example is the one you've presented there, the specifics. We've tried to answer as many as we can. I know that's been really well received by staff, and if members haven't seen that, I'll make sure you get sight of that.
Okay, Jane?
Thank you very much, Richard. That was very comprehensive. Can I just say that the free school meal issue, while obviously the really important thing is to get people fed, I have picked up one of the communities in our ward has indicated that there may be a problem with a council van pulling up at the door with what is obviously a food parcel of free school meals. This is about confidentiality and sensitivity, and the whole business of stigma in receiving free school meals. Now, I can see if you're going to prioritise somebody receiving food, but nevertheless, is there any way that we can make certain that this is avoided as far as possible?
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. That's a really good point, and actually one that's not sort of featured in any discussion, to be perfectly honest, with me to date. It's a really difficult one. Obviously, as you say, the priority is to get the food to the individual. But I'll have a conversation with colleagues, transportation, see what vehicles we're using, see which vehicles we've got that aren't liveried, see if there are any other ways we can endeavour to do things in a discreet and confidential way. And I'll happily come back to you on that one.
Stephen? Okay, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Leader. A couple of points, Richard, and thanks for going through all those various activities there. One of them was on staff who contract may be coming to an end today because there might be an term-time contract. I imagine this would be across the region in terms of support for learning assistance. You might be on just fixed-term contracts or term-to-term. But a lot of them would normally get that extended into the sort of final term of the year. This may be done centrally or through individuals from school partnerships or whatever. So I'm just wondering, is there work going on to sort of allow them to continue to participate and get redeployed, for example, to where the roles are needed at the moment, given that they technically wouldn't be council employees as of Monday or as of tomorrow even. So it's really just, there's a wee bit of housekeeping to be done there to make sure we've got staff today that we know we need. Might not have it on Monday. So there's that. And then secondly, just in terms of us having enough for ourselves, it's really encouraging to hear that we are working with partners to make sure we can share resources like the sanitizer you were talking about. Obviously, we don't want to be the ones sitting on resources when nobody else has got any, so if people are PPE, we make sure we coordinate that, as you say, with a priority resource for care home, for social health and social care workers, because obviously we've got it, so we need to get it out there to the people who need it to deliver the service of their homes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Yes, in answer to the first question, I know that colleagues are in discussion in regard to the individuals whose contracts are coming to an end. in terms of whether there is an opportunity to extend if indeed those tasks and functions that they're fulfilling are continuing to be required, or if the individual is in a different set of circumstances and actually is in a position and wishes to leave. But I know those conversations are happening, so I'll get an update from education colleagues specific to that group and happily feedback on that one. And just to reaffirm, absolutely, we'll make sure there is a coordinated and integrated approach with PPE, and what we have is prioritised to those key service providers.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thanks very much, Richard. Ian? Oh, it was Malcolm.
Yeah, it was just after last week, when the update with Steve, we were discussing what sort of things could be done for businesses with higher rateable values. Either alluded to some of these companies who are struggling to come up with cash, and Steve was saying there was ongoing discussions with the new economic agency, and I just wondered if there's a wee update of any progress that's been made with these discussions.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Yes, Steve gave a brief update to the senior leadership team yesterday to say that those discussions have started. It's early days, but there was nothing really specific over and above that. I think it was actually yesterday afternoon he was meeting them for the first time. So again, I'll speak to Steve and see if there's an update that we can circulate to members.
Anyone else? Anybody else? Oh, Ronnie.
Just one thing on, again, it's a PPE and community organisations. I realise you've got to prioritise them, but there's a lot of work going on in the communities, and obviously that'll be done on a risk assessment basis, is it? How we supply these community organisations and with PPE and also financial support if necessary.
Yeah, I think it's the same approach, Councillor Nicholson. We'll make sure that we prioritise, and that's done by ensuring that the appropriate risk assessment's been done, and if they need those personal protective equipment items in order to undertake those tasks either on our behalf or in partnership with us, then they'll be prioritised, aligned with everything else, particularly in the high risk services that we've talked about today.
Thanks very much, Richard. That was quite a long session again, but I think it just illustrates the amount of information that people have, really want to get gripped with. So we're going to have some discussion about how we continue that in future meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks. Okay, item number 5. Item number 5 is the communications plan and arrangements. The purpose of this report is to advise elected members of the COVID-19 communications plan for council response and recovery activities during this emergency period for information and review. Reliable and responsive communications are clearly essential, and many people have mentioned this, to the handling of the emergency, and I'm pleased to have seen that we are now in the position where all the stakeholders are getting regular updates in different formats. Our role today is to review the formal plan and make any suggestions for improvements. And we have Mark Malloy here to answer any questions. So can I put it over to members for any questions on the communications plan? Just to say that it's good to see it. Ronnie.
I think, you were now in here. I don't know if you heard the communication I had with Julie.
Yeah, I heard that.
At the start. And I think that is important that we do have, facts and figures on a daily basis going out there as well, especially with deaths and other, things that the community, on a community basis, that they need to hear. Yeah. So I think it is important. But overall, I've had all admiration for Mark. He's been put in there at the deep end in this communications, and you've risen at the challenge. But there will be other obstacles. But I think it is important, even though we're in a partnership basis and we can pat each other in the back in that partnership basis. I think the council reputation depends on what type of communications comes out from us as well. And if we don't agree with the NHS and one thing, we say we don't agree, because it is our reputation as well. We are joint and the partnership is working well, but there will be hiccups along the way, and I've no doubt there have been hiccups in the past.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Councillor Nicholson. That's certainly something that we'll take on board, and what we're trying to do is take an approach of providing members with as much information, including some of the real stories, but also the statistics around it, so that you have the full list of information. And I would rather provide members with too much information and get told that we are, than not provide you with enough. And that's the hopefully the 7-day briefing that you are receiving on a daily basis is helpful in terms of being able to see that, and our plan is to maintain what we currently have at this point.
Adam?
Yeah, it's not so much in the plan and the report in front of us. It's fantastic. I have no problems with that. Just one thing that we noticed in the Labour group was that in the daily briefing that we're getting at night, which is absolutely fantastic, that is in the figures that are provided in the number of cases and particularly the number recovered, it does seem to be a sort of day behind compared to what's being put out nationally. So it'd be welcome if we can get that fixed. So it's the most up-to-date information that's going out that day on those daily briefings. But apart from that, welcome and support the work that's been done around this.
I think the information is the information as at 11:30, isn't it? Whereas actually we don't get the figures till 2 o'clock. So I think that's probably the source of why we seem to be always lagging a day behind.
Councillor Murray, you're exactly right. It's in relation to the timing of the information when we're receiving it from the NHS, and then it's verified in terms of accuracy. So ultimately the figures that are in that daily report for you is reporting the previous 24-hour period. So I appreciate the challenge that we are sending that out around about 4 or 5 p.m. and the government's announcing the latest statistics at 2 p.m. But in terms of operation, it would be exceptionally challenging, I think, for us to be able to provide the more detailed information that we're giving members than maybe the government are putting out at 2 o'clock because of the timings of when we receive that from the NHS. But we'll take it back and speak to colleagues again in the NHS about to see if we can tighten that up any further to get you so that when you receive the briefing it includes the figures as accurate from 2 o'clock rather than in the morning.
Any other questions? Any remote questions?
Yeah,
Malcolm.
It's, I don't know what the answer is.
Well, you wouldn't ask the question if you did.
Essentially, in 3.6, there's a clear acknowledgement that needs to provide information to residents who don't have access or have limited access to the internet. How do you communicate with these people? That's obviously going to be quite a challenge.
Thanks, Councillor. What we are starting early next week is because it was a significant part that I was aware of in terms of members of our community that don't have access to the internet or social media, particularly maybe some of our elderly residents. So from early next week, along when people get their food packs delivered, either as part of shielding or as part of free school meals, we have established a staff communications group that are producing a physical newsletter that will provide key updates from our council, from our community planning partners, and also provide some light relief in it for maybe people who are bored at home with some suggestions of what they can do with their children and young people and crosswords and things. And so we're working with a group of staff who volunteered to take part in that, and that will go out from early next week. That will be issued twice a week so that we're targeting those residents, and that will have a circulation initially of about 5,000 and will be produced as 2 issues per week that will go out with the food pack deliveries. And through NHS colleagues, we're also looking at other groups that we may be able to provide that to as well, and through working with the supermarket providers locally as well in terms of working with them. So we're acutely aware of that, and we're also aware of our staff who are not on corporate networks as well in terms of how we provide them with staff updates. And just as of this morning, I've now put in place a system where those staff will have a direct web page on the public facing side so that they can provide access to information through their own device onto the council website, so that they can get the same information that we're providing to staff as well who are on council network.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It was just a couple of points. One was within the report itself, we get our updates about some of the before 6 o'clock, and that seems to coincide between post 4 and post 5, as you've set out the table there with E15. So presumably, as you've explained already, it's just a timing issue in terms of what is verified based on the previous couple of hours. The second point was really about on the public facing website, there's sort of two sections for COVID-19. One's a kind of it would seem intuitive that you just go to one bit, all you need to know about COVID-19, and then on there's another bit that says latest COVID-19 updates, and that's buried in amongst another pile of updates as well. So I'm just sort of wondering, would it not be a merit to having all the stuff on one page? You end up sort of click on one, and then you're on another page with updates, some of which seem similar to updates on the other page that are different. So it's just maybe a bit of housekeeping, and I know we're getting there, so maybe that's just a wee bit of feedback that we take on board.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Our web team has been working really hard in terms of ensuring that the website is easy to navigate for the public and having the information in the right place. From the middle of next week, we are moving to what's called a sub-site of the website, so that when you go onto our main council web page, you will click one button that will be on the main page, and it will take you through to a sub-site similar to the way the DG1 Leisure Complex has its own site, which will be a specific Dumfries and Galloway site for COVID-19. That will make it much easier to navigate for the public, although we have made significant progress in terms of the current site already being fit for purpose, and that will be in place by around the middle of next week, and we're working behind the scenes to get that around the specific points that you've mentioned, because I want to make this as easy as possible for any member of the public to go on and be able to find the relevant information that they're looking for. And what we are also implementing from late next week is that the full council website, and particularly the COVID sub-site, is going to have a new system on it which provides specific accessibility support for anyone who needs it across 100 different additional support needs or disabilities, and it will be the first time that we've done that within our council website, and that will significantly enhance the accessibility of that information to people, whether it be around different languages or whether it be around people that need to see screens in certain font size or in colour. So that will be in place by next week, but we've moved significantly ahead of where we were at 10 days ago, and you'll see a significant progress again next week.
That's great. Already there's been lots of positive progress, and it's really good to hear that that'll be taken forward even further, so thanks for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other remote questions?
Yes, please.
It's Rob.
Thanks, Elaine. Just like to go back to the point you made about involvement of NHS colleagues, thinking specifically that clearly it's primarily a public health emergency. We will not be able to answer things like matters and public health policy matters. Is there any consideration being given that you're aware of things having local health talking heads, as it were, mirroring the national stuff that's been done with Ad-Hoc and Jason Rees? I mean, they're practically household names by now, but I'm not sure that there's a local mirroring of that I've picked up yet. And it strikes me that, notwithstanding everyone being terribly busy, it might be a useful addition, and also help us to avoid straying into matters that we just can't provide the answers on.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. You've acknowledged a point that I think within our council we are acutely aware of, in terms of this is a public health emergency, and the public health information needs to be led by NHS colleagues. Currently, we are resharing a number of the national messages, but we are working to emphasise to our partners locally about the need of providing that credible voice locally in terms of that public health messaging. And after a meeting yesterday specifically around that, I would hope that we will see some progress in that early next week, but it is reliant on NHS colleagues prioritising that. But I do believe we've made progress yesterday, and I'll keep members informed and updated with that.
Okay. Anything further? Just couple of small points. I mean, first of all, I think, and I notice you're actually going to improve it even further, but actually I've been pretty impressed with the way in which our council has communicated compared to other authorities. I think actually our effort has been better. And in my view, it's been considerably better than the NHS's communications. I think they could learn quite a lot from us. I just wondered if, because I was one of the people nipping about the volunteering and people who have volunteered to volunteer not hearing anything further, and there was obviously an issue between us and Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway where they were saying, oh well, it's up to the council will get back to you, and the council wasn't getting back to people and so on. And I had a concern about the reputational damage to the council if we appear not to be getting back to people when they volunteered. I just wondered whether on our website we could have some information for volunteers as well, or people who've about what might be going on, who they can get in touch with. And because the particular concern I had is that just before lockdown, a communication came out from Gavin saying if you want to volunteer, go through this particular process, and people were going through the process and then not hearing anything further. And so I just wondered whether we can put some information for volunteers on that as well.
Yeah, I'll raise that, Councillor Murray, with the colleagues who are working through the Community Support Hub with Third Sector,
I have been
Dumfries and Galloway.
Yeah.
So
I'm not nagging with it.
I think it's an absolute valid point in terms of we need to harness that goodwill of the community and whether it be perception or reality, make sure that that from the council side we are supporting that as much as possible, which I think we are doing. In terms of the communication, I'll relook this afternoon at the volunteer section on the council website, but I think when we move next week to that sub-site, the concept is that Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, working with their colleagues internally in community support, will have a specific section in that will make it much easier for the public to find that information, and also for us to be able to provide information to volunteers. But I'll take that back.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Leader, can I make a small point, please?
Okay, surely. Yeah.
So I asked the question, Mark, of Julie White, Chief Officer for Immigration Joint Board. The last question I asked was, is there anything that we could do to support yourself in any way, leading us as the leader of public health be doing? The answer she gave back was in particular on what we could best help through the communications. You're heading that up. You do an excellent job with it, Lisa, but have you got the resources and equipment that you need in order to make that happen?
Thanks, Councillor Crothers. Yeah, as part of the redeployment of staff across the council to support efforts, I feel now we've got the right resources that we need to put in place an effective plan around our communications focused on members, the public and our staff. So we've got the right resources on board, and I think there is a real role there for members as civic leaders within your community in terms of helping to share some of that messaging and reassurance to the public, and already we've dealt with some members individually who have supported that, and would be happy to pick that up if there's any specific work that we feel could be supported within a ward basis or maybe more geographically across the region.
I suppose I maybe worded that wrong, but it's the response I got from Julie in particular was, okay, if we need anything from the council at this moment in time, it's the communications being made by the councillors, because you do such a good job, doing an excellent job. So I'm really just asking you, Mark, have you got enough resources to make sure that's happening? From your perspective, rather, I'm not going to talk about something at a personal level or local level myself. That may happen on occasion, it probably will for all elected members, but you've got to make sure that from a council perspective that you've got the resources that you need.
Yeah, no, I think we're comfortable with the resourcing that we've got to deliver the plan that is presented to members this morning. So I think we've got significant commitment there from both NHS and the council and other partners, including the Third Sector, Dumfries and Galloway, to ensure that communications is delivered effectively. Because we're very clear that my own view sometimes is that we've got the council's doing great work behind the scenes, but maybe we've not communicated that as effectively as we can. I think we've got an opportunity through this to reshape and refocus our communications, and using COVID as an opportunity to reshape that in the future going ahead.
Derek.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Leader. No, I think just to reassure members that we will follow up Julie's comment today and ensure we are absolutely clear what their ask is. and therefore we'll ensure that we clarify fully what that is, with a view to ensuring going forward there's a clear understanding of the shared resource that we could potentially bring to this, but also not to confuse in any way the public health messages that the NHS on a national basis and a Dumfries and Galloway basis need to make on these matters. So we'll clearly pick up these points today, been very helpful, and we'll follow them up and advise members in due course.
Okay, are we happy to move on to the recommendations, which are, we've noted 1 and 2, and we've considered the arrangements, and I think Mark has taken note of some suggestions which have come from members, so happy to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Item 6 is the Commission on Representation and Engagement, the review of the 2018 to 20 and emerging outcomes from 2020 to 22. This report is to review the performance information for the Commission for Representation and Engagement for 2018 to 20 and to agree the arrangements and outcomes for the Commission on Representation and Engagement for 2020 to 2022. It's clear from Appendix 2 that there has been significant work undertaken by these 5 organisations on behalf of the minority groups they represent. And looking forward, there's a possibility that the way our Council supports communities may change in the longer term as the result of the current emergency. So it would perhaps be appropriate to consider a 1-year commission to allow some flexibility if things change over the next few months. We have Liz Vance, remotely, I think. Yeah, good. On Teams to speak to the report and answer any questions. Liz, is there anything further you want to say?
Perhaps just to reiterate your opening comments, Chair, I think you will see in Appendix 2 there has been a really impressive amount of work delivered, and I think we're getting really good value from these organisations. I think each year of the Commission to date we have seen increased activity because the groups are able to work closely together and are developing a real and very genuine partnership in the delivery of this. I think the second point about the duration of the Commission is also very valid. Certainly we would be proposing the 1 year. It's absolutely essential. As you'll see, we've got the quality outcomes coming up for renewal. So this partnership will be key to making sure that we've got good dialogue and consultation with groups as we do that. But I think, as you've heard today, the relationship and the work of third sector organisations with the community is going through a period of change, and so I'm sure it would be fully understood if we want to perhaps just do the 1 year commission just now, and we'll come back to you early next year about what the second year might look like. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Any questions? Ronnie?
It's on the commissioning, yeah, I understand, and it's a good report. What circumstances, if things have to move quickly, for example, what kind of flexibility is built in to this system if something is needed in a local level and it can't go through certain criteria, or maybe some groups don't meet that criteria in full, but they can deliver that service that's needed at that time. So is there any flexibility within this system to accommodate that? No voice, Liz.
I think your mic's off.
On now?
Yep.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The arrangements for the Commission are about representation and engagement. So where the organisations themselves are perhaps providing a project or doing additional work, as exactly during COVID-19 when they're getting involved in some direct activity, there are other opportunities for funding, and we will be able to adapt very quickly to any additional needs.
Any other questions? Any remote questions? Yeah. Ian, are you indicating?
I think he's shaking his head.
Okay. So we're content to review the performance information, okay, and agree the arrangements, but for 1 year rather than 2 years in this instance under the current circumstances. Yep. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Liz. Moving on to item 7, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan Monreith. This report is seeking members' agreement of the reallocation of funding from the council tax on second homes to support the delivery of affordable housing at Monreith from the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust to Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership. And Jamie Little is participating by Teams to assist members with any questions. Jamie, are you there?
Yes, Lydia, I'm here.
Right. Anything further on this, Jamie?
Anyway, just one minor point is from the consultation process beforehand to elect the members is just to confirm that yes, this is the Monreith in the Macas, was one of the queries that was raised.
I went on holiday then when I was a small child, so I actually knew exactly what they're talking about.
Lovely place.
Yes. Any questions for Jamie? Ian?
Thank you, Lisa. Jamie. Thanks, Lisa. Just one small question. On the face of it, they look quite expensive to build. For it total, it's here, so divide that with private sector, 100,000. I wonder if you could explain that way. Is it the quality? Is it the design topography? What's that happening?
Jamie?
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Councillor Crothers. Yes, DGHB have found that this has been an incredibly expensive development. This has been the result of a value engineering exercise which has been able to bring the cost down quite significantly from the original tender. You'll appreciate that the works are in a very remote rural area which is added to the expense. A number of local contractors were pre-COVID-19 certainly tied up with significant developments elsewhere, including many of the framework contractors that are normally used. The buildings are being built to a very high specification as well. They're being built to the silver standard, which will provide extra energy efficiency measures to help resolve some of the challenges of fuel poverty that's often found in rural areas. These are some elements that, while they have created an additional expense, it's felt that they're worthwhile continuing based on this because they have wider strategic objectives for the council and for the partner organisations involved.
Ian? Yeah, you're happy with that? Jane?
Thank you, Leader. I have nothing more except to say that this is simply about reallocation from one body to another. And the local member, Councillor McCody, said that he felt it was a very good use of the second homes monies on the basis that that area particularly has a lot of second homes. So thank you. I think I say nothing more than say agree the recommendations.
Right. Ivor?
It's just with regard to the AHSP funding. Is that time limited, or under the current circumstances do we get an extension in case we can't deliver the houses in a certain amount of time?
Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. The funding is currently time limited. That's obviously being kept very much under review. We only know of guaranteed funding up until March 2021 at the moment from the Scottish Government. The development is on hold at the moment, as are all developments across the region for all affordable housing programme projects. The limit will obviously be kept under review. We would hope that the Scottish Government will be flexible with the allocation of funding, but that has been made available at this time, and we would, pending obviously COVID-19 outcomes and advice that's given to the construction industry, that we're still able to deliver this project within the current timescales.
So is that money's committed rather than spent? Is that by that date?
Committed, that's correct,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, we move to the recommendations. So, oh, Stephen.
Yeah. Those recommendations, I think there was just a wee question about, obviously this money goes back quite a few years. 2011, I think it was, in 2016 when the Housing Sub Committee looked at it a couple of times. Are there any other pockets of money that are not progressed? Obviously this is a project that's been in the pipeline for 9 years. So is there anything else that we should be looking out for, I think, forward?
Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. The nature of allocations from council tax and second homes towards construction projects does often mean that they cover a multiple financial year period. This one is obviously extremely long, and we do keep the funding from council tax and second homes under regular review and meet with colleagues from finance regularly to review a lot of the projects that are there. We also then meet and discuss any allocations with the relevant applicants to ensure that their projects are going to be delivered in the future, and should there be opportunities to reallocate that funding to bring that back to members for any decisions in the future. But at the moment, this is the only allocation that we are aware of, that there was no chance of progression under the previous agreement, so we're seeking to reallocate it to DGHP.
Okay, we're happy to note the investment of 940k for the delivery of 5 affordable homes, and to agree the reallocation of the 105k for the delivery of affordable housing in Monreith. Grand. Item 8, this is the Housing Scotland Act 2006 Scheme of Assistance. The projects contained in this report are vital services to vulnerable people living in our region, and their contribution to supporting people will be needed now more than ever. Jamie is again with us to assist members with any questions. This is an annual report which usually goes through the communities, but obviously we're dealing with it this time. Okay, any questions from members? Ian.
Thank you, Jamie. So I suppose when I was looking at this, apart from 2.5, which is the trader scheme, the rest is to be delegated to joint. So in principle, I agree with the recommendations that are there. Obviously, I suppose a lot of good projects that we've seen in the past being fulfilled, we'll see going forward. But it's the technicality around the integration joint board currently being stood up as it stands, and the ability for, if we do make this decision, they do think how that money can be progressed and spent. Is there any technical legalities, so to speak, or procedures that might stop this being spent because of integration joint board not making any decision at this moment in time, or is it just a straightforward process that we can administer?
Jamie?
Thanks, Lisa. This is a relatively, I suppose in terms of current circumstances, relatively straightforward approach that this will allow for the direct commissioning of these contracts for this financial year. We're in regular contact with the IJB on a number of matters, but obviously specifically in regards to these allocations over the past few weeks, there's been regular dialogue with the staff and operational matters within the IJB. There may, obviously, in terms of COVID-19 and the timescales that the guidance is in place about entering people's homes, there may need to be a review of the particular functions to ensure that we're still able to maximise the delivery of this funding allocation and the relevant projects. But we do have a steering group meeting, and things are kept under regular review, and we would look to prioritise the workload in whatever way we possibly could at that time.
Thanks, Lisa. So what I'm taking from that is that through the scheme of delegation from the integration joint board to the health and social care partnership, it can be dealt with that way. That's what I'm taking from that. Thanks very much.
Jamie, Councillor Dryburgh had a question. He said that in terms of the care and repair, that procurement process had started a couple of years back, which would have involved procuring services from other small organisations, small businesses and charities, and so on. But the procurement process had paused. I just wondered if you had any information on that.
Yes, the procurement is being led by staff within the IJB. The procurement process has been a rather protracted process, I would say. It's taken a lot longer than we'd certainly hoped it would. The latest position is that an extension to the LOBA and the handyvan contracts has been put in place for a further 6 months. The procurement process, I've been advised just within the last week, is in its final stages and is ready for final sign-off, and that will allow the procurement process to then be advertised and to seek the applications from contractors operating within the region. This won't impact on the current service, as I say, because the 6-month extension has been put in place to ensure the service can continue to be delivered. However, the IGB have taken a little bit longer in this procurement than we would have hoped. There has been some.
I think we've lost you. Right. Okay.
Sorry, can you hear me?
That's it. I'm hearing you again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you again, yes.
Right, yeah. So the procurement process is well underway at final stages, and we're told that should be resolved within the next 6 months. I'll keep in regular contact with the IGB specifically on that matter, and obviously through the steering group as well.
Thanks. I'll let Councillor Dryburn know about. Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, could I ask a question?
Malcolm, yeah, Malcolm.
Yeah, trusted trader scheme, kind of tag on at the end of the IGB stuff. Just at the moment, I was wondering if this is a decision we should be taking at the minute, because I think at the end of the day, what we've been more concerned about just now is actually sustaining the traders rather than the trusted trader scheme. I know it does a great job, and I still have doubts as to why it's not self-financing, whether we should be perhaps getting some fees for people for being listed on it. And I just think at the moment, in the current climate, maybe we keep some of that out of trying for business assistance and things, and I wonder if it would be a viable option perhaps to postpone that decision for the moment.
Jamie, any comments on that?
Yeah, so in terms of the trusted trader, one of the reasons that it isn't self-generating income is that to try and enable local contractors of certainly of a small nature to ensure they're involved in the project, there's been no fees charged to them, hence the reason for funding it from the council tax on second homes budget. The current work of the trusted trader is focused on supporting them during the current COVID-19 times and ensuring that they are fully aware of all Scottish Government guidance that's being provided to contractors. It has meant a slight change in the way that they operate. The staff member that's dedicated to trusted trader is also now assisting in the process of allocating grants as part of the scheme that was discussed earlier during the verbal update. So the work of the trusted trader system is still very much ongoing, and members have always in the past supported the not charging traders any fees based on that potentially being prohibitive to some of the smaller contractors being involved in the scheme. These smaller contractors are obviously vital to the region, and ensuring that they're able to provide these services to the local residents has been one of the main successes of the trusted trader scheme.
That's quite, I accept all that, and I actually support the scheme. I think it's a super idea, getting some form of accreditation to local suppliers. I just think sometimes perhaps, in the future, year one could be a free of charge system, perhaps look at some element of, payment going forward after that, just to sustain it. And then if we can sustain it on that basis, then you can potentially help even more businesses, which would be a first class thing. But I accept what you say, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, proceed to the recommendations, which is just to agree the transfer of the 5 funding streams. Okay, happy? Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Item 9 is the local development plan, the supplementary guidance on developer contributions to upgrade the water supply at Gretna border. This is really a procedural report, but it is an important and rather long-standing issue for the council. Wendy McLeod is joining us on Teams to assist with any questions. Wendy, are you there?
Good afternoon, yes, I can hear you loud and clear, thank you.
Well, we can hear you too, and we can now see you as well. Okay, anything further to add, Wendy?
I just wanted to say, in terms of these, it's a good news story during these difficult times. We've secured this £5.5 million worth of investment in conjunction with Scottish Water and the Scottish Government. and it will look to secure the investment of the various sites identified in the Local Development Plan 2, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, and also help support the Borderlands programme in the short to medium term, and obviously it will also help support the local construction industry. Thank you.
To say as somebody who I'm pretty sure I was involved with this back in 2005. I'm pleased to see the progress being made. It's taken a very long time, but it's good to see it happening now. Members, any questions? Ivor.
It's just with regard to 3.6, where it says once the money's been recouped, we'll not sort of ask for further contributions. Do you think that'll maybe have a negative impact on development by the fact that people will say, well, we'll wait till later on, till the 1,250,000 cost isn't there? That's one of the concerns. And does this apply to all sites or just private sector developments?
Wendy.
To answer your questions, Councillor Hislop, the parameter of £500,000 has been set because that's what the Council is contributing as part of this joint package. And obviously that will relate to quite a number of house permissions in the Gretna area. And your second point was?
Forgotten.
I think Ivor was concerned that some developers might hold back until, in the hopes that they might not have to make any sort of contributions if they allow if they wait to the end of the queue.
What was the public sector as well? Is it public sector?
Oh yeah, the other part was actually, I suppose, does this apply to registered social landlords as well as private developers?
The contributions apply to all sectors of development, including registered social landlords in this case. So it's across the board in terms of a contribution to development.
Right.
Ian?
Houses. So the first 11 houses will be 60,000.
So the allocation for the Greater Border plans are way up. The Greater Border was 722 units. So do the calculation, and you wonder where you get again, it's less than half, I would think, 1250. So you wonder where you get the 1250 figure from, and that's taking a really important number on Ivor's point. So he's saying, okay, I think it's approximately half the houses were built out at the second half. Developers wouldn't actually contribute to we cover the £500,000. So it's as much about, I don't think, nobody's against the developer's contribution, no personal views and ours, but it was a welcome decision that comes back in December to put money into this type of investment. It's absolutely future-proofing the local area in there. How do you actually come to that 12? I get real terms when you do the calculation, when it doesn't add up.
Wendy.
In response to that, Councillor Crothers, as Councillor Murray alluded to, this constraint and issue has been going on for some considerable time in Gretna since 2006. And earlier on in the process, there was an earlier developer contribution supplementary guidance, and these levels of developer contribution were set at that rate. Obviously, only in terms of doing the sums, it will be developments which are coming forward earlier will require to contribute. And once the 500,000 sum has been reached, there'll be no contributions thereafter. And obviously, we hope it won't. It's going to remove that development constraint. So the figures have been set in relation to the previous approach taken. Does that answer your question?
It does really, but it's been based on historic calculations, I think, is what we're saying. So I think we do understand that. I'm not going to labour the point at all. We understand. I don't think it was over. I don't think we recovered that much in the last time we used it. I don't think it was overly successful. But and my principle is that I just welcome the fact that the council put that contribution aside and the council government got £5.5 million for the investment. That was the right thing that happened at the time. Whether we get a penny back for this is neither up to them as far as I'm concerned. It actually benefits that's definitely it benefits the local community in that area. I really think that's really good. Thank you.
We're not being asked to agree that today. That's already gone through. All that we're being asked to do today is to agree to notify Scottish ministers of our intention to adopt the developer contributions to upgrade the water supply. So, to a certain extent, that decision has already been taken at an earlier committee.
Yep.
Are we content then to agree to notify ministers of this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Grant.
Okay. It's been again.
It's Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sometimes away.
I can see a meme of it we've got.
Just a quick question on the appendix. It talks about payment rates for the types of development. You've already clarified that applies across the board, including to the resident carousels. It also in 3.4.1, it does say that there'll be additional legal agreement. So presumably, if the 500k made up of unit cost, the legal cost will be accounted for separately. So you know that the total cost of the developer and the legal cost might end up being partially offset with the 500k. So presumably there'll be that calculation ongoing as the development is coming through the system. And also, of course, allocated housing sites, while there may be some there's been plenty around that don't get fulfilled. So it's not just because we've allocated so many sites for housing doesn't mean they'll actually get developed. So maybe there's a wee bit that's factored into the mix as well, I imagine.
Wendy?
Yeah, rest assured will be monitoring the position very carefully in relation to appropriate consents and contribution, and I note the point that you make in relation to Gretna. Thank you.
Okay. So are we happy to agree to notify Scottish ministers? Right. Okay. Good. Number 10, climate change emergency declaration progress to March 2020. It's important that we maintain the pace as much as is possible in implementing the action plan arising from our climate emergency declaration agreed last June. Some of the work to be progressed can be done by virtual engagement. Indeed, when the reason for our acceleration of the digital solutions and remote working is extremely sad, we should ensure that the benefits arising from it are sustained to contribute to carbon reduction. Councillor Dougie Campbell is participating via Microsoft Teams and would like to address the subcommittee in line with his role as Environment Champion. And Stephen Fieldhouse is also joining us by Teams to assist with any questions. Dougie.
Thanks, Leader. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you and we can see you now.
Thank you. So just a few things to say in relation to the report and where we are. And this report was actually being prepared for the E&R committee in terms of what's been done over the last 6 months and a direction in terms of where we're going. And of course that's all been overtaken by COVID-19. But we were, I think, at a very critical point in terms of having done the groundwork. The officers group have been doing a lot of great work in terms of reviewing policy and practice, developing an updated impact assessment tool, and starting to look at the specific themes that we want to move forward on. And the cross-party working group have been overseeing the implementation of the 12-point plan. You can see that in the appendix in terms of the progress that's been made against each of the 12 points in the plan. So in terms of the impact that COVID-19 has, and obviously the Council's priority is very much on the crisis as it stands, and I appreciate that that's going to impact on initially our ability to deliver on the citizens panel, which was scheduled to take place in June by means of a webcast. And that would be our first opportunity to actually engage directly as a council on our plans in terms of reacting to the climate emergency and to get people involved in starting to shape the way forward for us. That work was led by Kirsty Peden, but she's otherwise engaged at the moment in some very, very important work. So I suppose what I'm looking for from the committee is an indication that we will get back on track as soon as possible in relation to the work on the climate emergency and implementing the 12-point plan. But also there's an issue in terms of engagement with partners. And, see from the report there's reference to a report going to the Community Planning Partnership in June. And that was effectively going to be our first opportunity to encourage partners to follow our lead and also to consult with them on the development of the strategic action plan, which we had hoped would have been launched in November to coincide with the COP26 conference, but as I'm sure everyone knows, that's been postponed. So from my point of view, I would like to see work in the background progressing in terms of developing the strategic action plan, the work that needs to be done there through the project officer who took up the post on the 16th of March, Sarah Farrell, and with the leadership of that from Simon Fieldhouse. Simon can perhaps comment on that. And hopefully, when we have a date for COP26 next year, we can be at a much more advanced stage. So rather than hopefully encouraging delegates to come to the region and say, well, look at our new plan and look at this strong cross-sector partnership approach we're taking, that we can actually be looking at, indicating what we're actually delivering. I think there's an appreciation out there for the position that the council are in terms of our absolute priority is on the coronavirus crisis, but that we are still committed when we're at the other side of this to charge forward with the climate emergency work. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just a couple of minor points. Obviously, just to reassure, Councillor Campbell and the committee that work is still being taken place to develop the strategic action plan. Obviously, the Appendix 1 and Appendix 1A that were submitted were developed obviously prior to the current crisis, and we need to review those in terms of timescales. But work is still underway with a view that within 6 months we will have a strategic action plan that we can bring back for approval. Obviously, what we have got is obviously, given the current position in terms of the lockdown and the new opportunities and ways of working, obviously what we need to understand is how we can take some of the positive angles from that and look at how we can implement those in terms of operational requirements as we come back to the new normal. So I think it's just to reiterate and support obviously the statement Councillor Campbell's will be made, and that we are looking obviously at trying to progress things as much as possible in this period of lockdown.
Can I just ask you one sort of a technical thing, or sort of technical? We allocated 50k from the Change Fund to the delivery of the climate change emergency or to make progress and to employ a member of staff. But the intention at that time was to make additional budgetary consideration when we came to set the budget for 2021. Now, obviously, we've not done that. But we have no indication in here about a requirement for additional funding, and I would imagine we will require additional funding for this within the next financial or the upcoming financial year over and above that 50k which was allocated from last year.
Yes, thank you, Lee. Yeah, the 50k that was allocated through the Finance Committee was to take us to the 31st of March, which obviously has been done. We are looking obviously at the budgets moving forward. I'm aware that there are some proposals put into place to bring additional resources in, but I'm obviously not too sure where they are at this moment in time. At present, obviously, the work through the offices will take place with the existing budgets, obviously ensure we can deliver that as smoothly as possible. But obviously, there will come a time when further resources are required, and we'll bring a more detailed report back to members for consideration and agreement.
Thanks. Any questions from members? Stephen.
Yeah. Thanks, Leader. Yeah, no, it's, I'm encouraged to hear Simon just talk about that this lockdown is actually an opportunity. We might be less businesses putting clouds of smoke in the sky, but each of those fewer clouds still has a silver lining, and one of them is the fact that we can use this to effectively test remote working more effectively, iron out some of the bugs and things, and actually help move towards ASCA 8 and the development plan. Some of the things we'd like to do to sort of reduce the carbon impact in the region, or net zero, at least in terms of travel, to work in different ways. So I think that there's an opportunity that this emergency, if you like, actually provides an accelerator for a lot of the initiatives that we could be taking forward. I think sounds like he's on top of that already. So it shouldn't be seen as an obstacle. Obviously, staff will be employed for that, which is a challenge. But this is actually an opportunity, and another guys to actually take the staff.
That's more of a comment. Any other questions, Adam?
I suppose not really a question. I think I've been quite clear, fully support the measures that we're taking, but I've always been quite clear that we need to turn quickly as to how we reduce carbon emissions, and I've been quite clear on that. Obviously, during this pandemic, we are seeing carbon emissions reduce quite significantly, and I think that for me, the main bit of work for us should be actually what is the percentage of carbon emissions that is reduced during this time, and how do we sustain that over the long term when we go back to, as Simon described it, the new normal. I think is a key thing for me at the moment, because there's obviously there's a big bit of work in the council being done to deal with the pandemic. But secondly, as we go into that recovery, for me, we need to focus on actually how do we try and get, I don't want to call them benefits, but some of these maybe changes in the way that we work, changes in the way that we live, changes in the way that we travel. How can we keep those going so that reduction in carbon emissions can be sustained and can carry on in the future?
Yeah, I think it's about good practice, isn't it? We may learn from good practice which has been enforced on us at this point. Anything, Jane, you wanted to come into?
Yes, please, Elaine. I agree with that. Lynch from calling them benefits, actually, because we ought to gather what we can from this. I think Simon touched on the phrase, and I think he said the new normal. Well, I think that's probably a strand of work that we could badge with the council moving forward. And I think we absolutely should do this. We've got to grab the opportunity that comes out of this horrible time that we're going through. Actually, our citizens would expect us to do that. One question, please. It's been put to me that the citizens panel might be formed out of people who actually have an address in Dumfries and Galloway, or a postcode in Dumfries and Galloway, but perhaps really ought to be on the electoral roll. I don't know if you've got any comments to say about that, whether in fact it should be restricted to people who are on the electoral roll, rather than somebody simply saying they have
Any views on that? I mean, I suppose there's an issue about residency. We do have quite a lot of second homes here where people have a postcode but are not resident. Doogie?
I take the point, but what I wouldn't want is for it to exclude the views of our young people, who I think should be integral to this. So we need to think how we actually incorporate that tie. I mean, from my point of view, what I would like is to have a broad representation across the region as is at all possible, across all age groups, against all sort of standard demographics, and with representation from partner agencies as well, so that we've got a well-balanced picture in terms of the the impact that what we propose moving forward is taken into account. But in terms of electoral role, that probably would be a good way of managing the input from people living in the communities. But also what we intended doing with the first phase of the citizen panel was to ask people if they had any particular skills or experience so that we can tap into that. So I think that's an important element of it, and it's certainly something that I've seen firsthand the sort of public engagement I've been doing over the last few months, the skills that are out there and the people who are willing to play their part. And also, importantly, we need to listen to people who don't necessarily agree with what we're proposing, not in a disruptive way, but we need to listen to all voices on this to make sure that what we produce at the end of the day is the best fit for the region.
Jane, do you want to come?
No, I take your point. I think it's probably a suck and see. If we have to change the parameters later on, then so be it. If there's a problem and it's abuse of the system, I presume we could revisit it.
I think it is important, though, to get the views of young people. I hadn't really thought that through, but which is important that we get the views of young people. They won't necessarily be old enough to be on the electoral register, but they still have a contribution to make.
Yep.
Anything further? Doogie?
Just on the engagement with young people, I've had a fair bit of contact with our youth councillors and members of the Scottish Youth Parliament, and they actually submitted their own report to me, which is now in the hands of Simon and Sarah Farrell. And I have to say it's actually very impressive in terms of their understanding and knowledge of what needs to be done to adapt to climate change. And I think that would be a very good vehicle for us to ensure that we have got those young voices in the mix.
Yeah, after all, one of the people who kicked this off globally was a 16-year-old, so young people have got a fairly important perspective on this. Okay, any further points or questions for Doogie or Simon? Okay, happy to note 1 and 2. To agree the draft Citizens Panel's consultation mandate and to agree to receive a further update. Okay, right, thanks very much. Item 11 is Annan Cemetery. This is a planning application and just seek some advice on this, given that people on the Planning Applications Committee require training. Should it only be the people who have had the training who take this choice to make this decision?
Certainly my understanding.
Yes, so...
I've received training during the week.
Right, you've had training, yes, and has everybody else who's on that? I think everybody else has been on the Planning Applications Committee, so that's fine. Oh, have you not had the training?
I think David can...
I haven't been trained yet, so I won't take part in this, but there's 2 other items.
Yeah, we've got 2 items after this, so yeah.
I'll remain virtually present, if that's
Okay,
okay.
yeah.
Likewise, Leader, I've not received training on this, so I'll watch from afar.
Okay. You just want to watch us, Ronnie?
Sit here and
watch us. Okay, we're still enough people who actually have been trained to take the decision. So. Yeah. Okay. So this was an agreement at our last subcommittee meeting that we would determine planning applications which statutorily require committee decision, and as the applicant to this decision, to this application is Dumfries and Galloway Council, it requires committee decision, and David Sutty is joining us on Teams to assist us with any questions. David, are you there?
How are you?
Right, let's see if we can see it. Yep, we can see you. Okay, we've been asked to approve the application. Do we have any questions? I don't know whether we have to go through the usual process of having slides, etc. David, do we have to?
I'm happy to answer any questions, take through slides as appropriate. All I would say is it's a very straightforward application. Just own it before yourselves because it's a council one. There's no objections to it. You should have 4 slides. Which
we have. Yeah, so I'll in the absence of Jim Dempster, who knows exactly how to do all this, can we throw it open to members for any? I presume we don't have to go through the actual stages of the planning application discussion where we do it, we go in session and all the rest of it. But Ivor's indicated he has a question anyway.
It's just the fact that we're being asked to give a temporary permission for these structures, but I would have thought the actual need for them is a permanent need for your community payback. That'll be something that carries on. Is there anything that we know in the background that they will come forward with a permanent solution?
Nothing has been clarified on that at the moment. It's normal practice to give something like this a 5-year permission. The reason why is covered in paragraph 4.5 of the report. If something is going to be a permanent need in that location, we'd obviously be looking for a better, more permanent design of building to fit in that location. As it is, it's a very well screened site, so we're quite happy to have it for 5 years in the initial phase. If it takes longer than that to get something more permanent up and running, or an application required, then obviously we'll look at that at the end of the recommended conclusion.
Any other questions on the application? Jane? Right, indeed.
Absolutely clear from the slides just exactly whether there's any viewpoint into the site. I don't think there is, but can I have confirmation that that is the case? Because our policies say that we should not be sticking porta cabins on a permanent basis. Now, this is 5 years, but they've already been used, and I would be curious to know how long their lifespan is actually expected to be. So it's viewpoint first, and then the lifespan. The lifetime.
David.
Sorry, bear with me. David, unfortunately, the line breaks up a lot. Hopefully, you've got slides in front of you. The first one will show you the site is screened by a perimeter high solid lavanda hedge. So on that basis, the site is except in the southwest corner where there's a 2 metre high timber fence. It is exceptionally well screened. So on that basis, we are quite comfortable with the temporary use of application.
Jane's second point was what sort of lifespan is this likely to have, these porta cabins? Because they've been there a while.
Yes, they've already been in situ in the council's depot in Stapleton Road, which, because the depot's been sold, that's likely to go. Normally, you would expect demountable buildings such as this to have a lifespan of about 10 years. So that's again why we're looking at 5 years, given that they're already in situ. I have actually seen them in reality, and they're pretty good just now, so I'm comfortable that at least 5 years, I think, is acceptable.
Thanks. Ian?
Thank you, Leader. I just think I think it says annual release the next deal. I think it's annual, so it says within the report. Very comfortable with the recommendations that are being, I would move to support this and approve the recommendations as presented to me.
Anybody have a contrary disposition? No. So we're happy to approve the application then. Right, thanks very much. Thank you. Okay. The 2 urgent items of business have been circulated to all members. The first one being the additions to Dumfries and Galloway Council's scheme of delegation and responsibilities to officers and statutory appointments in Community Planning and Engagement Manager and Interim Head of Democratic Services. The purpose of this report is to advise members of 2 additions that have been made to the scheme of delegations and responsibilities to officers and statutory appointments. This report is presented as a late additional report for member consideration because the amendments were made to the scheme after the committee agenda had been published. The report should not be delayed to a later meeting because the scheme of delegations and responsibilities and statutory appointment requires to be presented to the next meeting. And Liz is back with us to on Teams to answer any questions. I understand this is necessary because of legislation which went through the Scottish Parliament this week. Liz, are you present?
I can't actually see Liz there,
I don't see Liz.
Leader, but yes, it's part and parcel with some of the legislation that's gone through Parliament this week, and this specifically, as set out at paragraph 3.3 with the 2 bullets there in terms of is consequent upon the Coronavirus Act 2020, specifically in relation to serving of prohibition notices on premises which continue to operate in spite of the restrictions.
Okay, any questions? Okay, so we're just being asked to note the changes at the moment because there's going to be a further report to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, content to note?
Noted.
Good. And finally, we have the temporary revision to the Treasury Management Strategy. This report asks members to endorse temporary revisions to the Council's Treasury Management Strategy to recognise the cash flow implications of the COVID-19 response. These arrangements needed to be put in place to ensure that our Council is able to operate during these challenging times. Approval was sought and received under the terms of Standing Order 19.1, matter of ordinary business that requires to be dealt with expeditiously, as a decision was required before this next scheduled meeting of this subcommittee on the 3rd of April to allow the measures to be taken to minimise Treasury management risk to the Council. And basically we discovered at short notice that almost £41 million was being transferred to the Council from the Scottish Government for the COVID-19 response, and that then therefore took us over our Treasury limits with a number of accounts, and therefore these had to be extended for a temporary period in order for that money to be received, and obviously we need to receive the money in order to be able to disperse it as quickly as possible. So I don't know who is actually taking this.
I can see Paul's not there. I know Paul was involved in some other meetings, so he's obviously not been able to log in at this point. But certainly Paul Garrett as Section 95 officer made myself and Lorna, who's undertaking the Deputy Chief Exec role, with the Chief Exec being involved on national business. So we undertook, in consultation with the leader and the deputy leader, the process to get an expedited decision taken, the details of which are set out in the report in terms of varying the limits for funds on deposit with each bank. As the leaders set out, this was in response to some accelerated payments received from the Scottish Government for grant assistance to businesses in the area. So the Lorna in the Deputy Chief Exec role, following the consultation, was happy to approve the measures as set out in the report.
Any questions? Adam?
I'm completely happy with what's in the report, and obviously, it's good to have that money in the bank so we can dish it out to local businesses, and as we've heard earlier on, a number of those businesses have got it. One thing that was on my mind when I read this report is what assessment has been done on that, because I noticed that it's only for a month. And I appreciate that this particular decision was taken on the basis that we received a sum of money that we didn't expect to receive. But I'm thinking that in terms of our capital investment strategy, it's highly likely that very little amounts of that money will be spent in the next couple of months. I did a quick calculation last night as to how much money we're most probably getting into the bank every week that would be spent on our capital investment strategy. So I'd be quite keen to know if there's been any assessment as to money that we may not spend over the next couple of weeks and months, where this decision might need to be taken again, or if appropriate investment decisions are being taken for money that may not be spent. Particularly I'm thinking the capital investment strategy. Obviously the revenue budget is predominantly taken up with staff costs, which are still going to remain, so we're quite keen for clarification and reassurance on those issues.
I'm certainly not aware of that, whether there has been any work done on that, but well.
I mean, I guess what I would say is that obviously the situation will be kept under review, certainly on the Treasury management side of things. Things are reviewed almost on a daily basis, so I'm sure that the Section 95 officer, if there's a need for an extension, will certainly sort of make that known.
I think the intention with these monies, though, is that it should be dispersed as quickly as possible, because this is money to assist our local businesses, and we want to get it out the door as fast as fast.
Completely get that for in terms of this decision, but in terms of depending how long this lasts, it could be a number of budgets that go unspent.
I did offer, because it was a short time scale, the money was going to be in the bank, to put in mine instead, but I didn't take the rest in my bank account. Wasn't taken up.
Is there any other issues that could arise out of Treasury management? I'm thinking, if this goes on for a while, if banks start their ratings to drop, do we need to look at other issues in relation to, currently we're putting the money into the bank that has a certain rating. If it drops down, but is it? Used to be AAA, wasn't it? I think it was AA plus or something now. If it dropped down to AA or A plus or something, would that need to be coming forward, or can that happen at the appropriate time? It's nothing that we need to preempt.
I mean, I wouldn't pretend to know the provisions of the Treasury management strategy in a massive amount of detail, but certainly I recall Council certainly reviewed their strategies in the light of the Icelandic bank situation, with many banks being recategorised, if you like, and I know our strategy has sets out some rules around what banks we use, etc., based on what their rating is, how much we deposit with them, etc. So I'm sure that Paul and his team will be keeping that under careful review and come to members if there's any need for anything to be revised.
Any other questions? Any remote questions? Nope.
What a great problem to have.
Too much money, yes. Thanks very much, members. That concludes our business today. Our next meeting is on the 9th of April, and that's just because we'll have just the one item on the agenda, which is the appointment of the Head of People and Transformation. Now, I'm anticipating that we will maybe have a meeting the following week, but the format might be somewhat different, because I don't think we have any urgent decisions to take at that point. However, I know that from the discussion we had at the leaders' meeting last night, that there was a desire to receive reports on the progress of things like the business assistance and the assistance around tackling poverty. So I would suggest that we meet with the purpose of having updates on those particular issues, rather than making sort of urgent decisions the week afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to confirm that certainly what we want to ensure, the primary purpose of the committee is to make these urgent, important decisions, and therefore, as far as possible, what we'll do is look at ways to ensure the subcommittee and potentially all members are fully assured of the action being taken to bring about economic recovery and help the most vulnerable people. So certainly more than happy to pick that discussion up with leaders in the coming days of how we best achieve that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the group leaders can discuss maybe at the beginning of the week after next, as to whether we feel that that's right, or we need to have a meeting, because I know there was quite a desire. I know also that Julie seems to have indicated that she was content to come back and for us to ask her further questions and so on. So we might feel that we wanted to have an update type of meeting, even if there are decisions to be taken. Oh, Jane?
Can I make 2 quick points? Point number 1 is that I'm quite happy, Councillor Carruthers, to say that I think I was wrong yesterday about requiring Julie to come down, because I think she could give some useful information. The second thing I will say is that I think it's as important as possible to get other members listening in real time. So I really think that's terribly important to get that happening. So I don't know whether we can get that message out, but I think that's a priority.
I mean, I'd be interested if there are other ways. And we've attempted to reach out to all members of the council using the Teams process, and the other, people are not comfortable about the discussions on Teams to get the information back. And I know that groups are all meeting in order to for the leaders to be able to get feedback from the group members. But are there other ways that members feel that information can be disseminated that would actually help the other members to feel more included?
Yeah, Leader, I've certainly been asked to raise the point about live streaming of the meeting, and it should be within our gift technically to be able to do this. I'm sure we've had calls from across the council, from many members, but how we do that when we're dealing with sensitive information is maybe a different question, but I'm sure we have the means to do that so that all members could at least be able to listen, if not participate necessarily, if it came to a vote, for example. But it really is something we should be exploring urgently.
I actually understood that was happening today.
Streaming certainly isn't happening today. We're not in a position to do that today. We need to undertake some further testing and determine what's the best way to do it. There are sort of different ways we could do it, but in terms of it would be difficult to put the think of the right phrase, to put the IT attached to this meeting at risk if we, for instance, if I simply sent them Teams invite to all 43 members and we had 43 members trying to get in at one time. Now, hopefully, we're robust enough to be able to cope with that, but certainly in its infancy anyway, I would have had some major anxiety about trying to do that whilst we're sort of getting to grips with this new way of operating. But certainly it's something we're looking at actively, and we'll come up with something that hopefully members will be satisfied.
So just an audio recording that's been done today?
Yes, it's an audio recording today.
Yeah. How quickly can that be made available for members to listen to?
We'll plan to get that up this afternoon. But certainly the live side of things is what we need to give some more consideration to.
Ian?
Thanks, Lisa. Just on the back of the conversation that's been had there, I think it must be the simplest thing in the world to get a webcam or something up with other members, the members that are a member of the committee must be able to access the audio live stream. It's got to be simple, surely. I just don't see a difficult with that. Even if we allow them to access via Skype or in a weekly basis, there must be a way of doing it. To me, it seems like a very simple thing. John, person locally. I mean, the way people now, even the older generation, start to interact over the web, and we're only accessing it very different. We've got to say don't listen to the appointments process in real terms of the appointment appeals committee, that'll be excluded for public. So I don't understand why you wouldn't have access to that. Absolutely, this type of meeting, it's in the public. It's no, I can't see it being any wrong before it gets published. So, I just think it must be the most simplest thing to achieve in a short term.
Yeah. Ronnie?
No, I agree there are different ways without interfering with the council system. I mean, everybody does it. A group, for example, in WhatsApp, it's a video, it's out with the council's system, so you could actually have that kind of system in place, and you can do it on a listening basis. I think at the moment, I think it's it's not ideal for individual members, and members do understand, on an individual basis, want to be involved in the council, and they've got constituents to answer to as well. But I think what we're doing just now, there is a system in place where I'm asked, and I take it other members are asked if there's any questions prior to this or comments they would maybe want to make, and if they have them in the day before, it'll be considered. Yeah. So I think that system is in place just now. It's not ideal, but it's there. So
I think it was just really if there was any improvements anybody felt could be made. Mm-hmm. I mean, I tried last week to write up my view, a sort of summary of what had happened, and I'll do the same again today. So there's something out there for members to have a look at and see what we discussed.
I would, through you, Leader, I would be more than happy for us to work with the political group leaders to take on board these comments and feedback and see where we wish to go and make the appropriate kind of suggestions in due course.
Yeah.
If you're happy with that.
Yeah, I think the idea of this committee is to make decisions as quickly as possible. Because of the unprecedented situation we're in, and I completely 100% agree with that. And you're going to ruffle a few feathers sometimes, but in the end up, you're doing it for the greater good, and it's not just individuals' thought processes that you have to take.
Can I get to it?
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your attendance and contribution. Thank you.
Iceland and Iceland.